This is Lonnie Clark with my co-host, Louisa Hamachek, on the Last Nuke, a radio program dedicated to help us permanently close the Columbia Generating Station, or as we call it, CGS.
CGS is the last commercial nuclear power plant in the Pacific Northwest at the federal Hanford nuclear site on the Columbia River in Richland, Washington. It's on top of newly discovered large earthquake faults, which could cause severe damage, resulting in a meltdown with radioactive fallout dust blowing in the winds of the Northwest. And the contaminated cooling waters could spill into the Columbia River, passing Portland on its way into the Pacific Ocean.
Join us each week as we share information and actions we are taking to realize the immediate permanent shutdown of the CGS nuclear power plant to help safeguard our families, our friends, animals, and our environment. Thanks for joining us. This is Lonnie Clark, and I'm here with one of my really good friends, Louisa Hamachek. We have been working, and she got me going on it, to be honest, to close down the Columbia Generating Station, which we will refer to as CGS. So we want you to understand that we're doing this half-hour radio show until we get the nuclear station that's only less than 12 miles away from Hanford shut down.
It is at Hanford.
It is on the Hanford
campus.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is this is going to be our little introductory radio show for the KEPW.org here in Eugene, Oregon. Eugene Peaceworks has a nonprofit radio station that is 501(c), and it is
C3.
Community 501.
C3.
I always
Nonprofit.
say. Yeah, exactly. The tax person saying the code backwards, wouldn't you know? But anyways, it's a 501(c)(3. That means that you could actually contribute to it and help it grow. So you can go to KEPW.org, sign up and become a contributor, and you can do the drop-down menu. An easy way to contribute to them is also make them one of your people on Amazon, so that Amazon has like where they contribute to nonprofits at Smile, Amazon/Smile, and then you look for KEPW.org. So we want to get into this thing about why are we doing this, because it's really, really important about closing the Columbia Generating Station.
Why are we doing this weekly radio show for half an hour?
Every week we're going to do a half-an-hour radio show. This is going to be our kickoff show. Mm-hmm. And it was my idea to make it into a YouTube video so that my YouTube subscribers can actually see us and see who we are. And we're hoping that this format will work so that every week we can come on and share a half-an-hour video with my YouTube channel here at Nuts for Art. And then we'll make it into an MP3 and post it up on KEPW.
Which means a podcast.
Which means a podcast.
Which means you can find it on our various websites, and we're going to be posting it on our various platforms that we both have.
That's right.
I work on the Nuke Info Project Northwest. Issues about radiation in the Northwest. Mm-hmm. What do you do?
Well, I post mine up on Spreaker. All my podcasts are on Spreaker. The channel name is Lonnie Clark, and I have a bunch of shows on there. You may know this. I repost Libby Halevi's show, Nuclear Hot Seat. I repost my shows, The Age of Fission.
And what's The Age of Fission?
The Age of Fission is my radio show that this will be on. Well, actually, this won't be on The Age of Fission radio show.
So you're having two radio shows about radiation, but this one is about shutting the last nuke, which is the Columbia Generating Station.
That's the title we've called it, The Last Nuke.
It is the last commercial nuclear power plant in the Northwest, the Columbia Generating Station, CGS, and it needs to be shut because it's dangerous in its setting right next to fault lines that were just discovered that are bigger than it can handle in its engineering.
Yeah. So anyways, first off, we thought we'd do is introduce each other to our radio listeners on our brand new show, The Last Nuke, because this is going to be our kind of kickoff show here. And we want to thank everybody for joining us. My show is on KEPW at 11 o'clock at night, The Age of Fission. And I interview activists who are either activists or most of them are usually very often nuclear victims who only got engaged because their families are being threatened.
And
right?
They're all over the place, right?
They are all over the place. And
so
I report on
she interviews
stories.
people who are in St. Louis, who are
Right.
victims of radiation problems.
That's right. Last week, I think I did post it up on my YouTube channel. It's a very important story. Two very important. Well, the one I haven't posted up yet, but the one about how the Trump administration has unilaterally decided to reclassify 100 million gallons of highly radioactive waste and just call it low radioactive waste so that they can transport it across state lines with very minimal security and bury it in shallow graves at low-level nuclear waste disposal sites.
In Utah and Texas?
Yes, and so they will be traveling from Hanford and from the Idaho National Laboratory to Utah and Texas and South Carolina
and we
to
might
Texas.
well ask where in Utah, and you might well find that there's some little-known Native American tribe, Goshutes. Go figure. And
Is that what it's going to be?
That's what at one point it was, but I'm not sure.
We really appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast and watches our videos, because we're going to be putting them up because this is important information. Like, the Trump administration has just magically, deliciously decided that high-level radioactive waste is now low-level, and they can bury it in shallow graves instead of highly maintained low grades.
Okay, so what we're going to get to is this show is going to be all about shutting the Columbia generating station.
Precisely. You can follow the Age of Fission for all that other stuff.
And what I want to get to back on that, thanks, is that we're going to give you actions. This is going to be a half-hour show. We're going to begin it with an article that we will be interviewing some interesting people, and we're going to break it down into small pieces so we can shut this nuke by you guys all catching on. And the purpose of the show is to interview some of our agency people who we are the bosses of as citizens who work for the Department of Energy, the Bonneville Power Administration. What is that? A public utility? Is that us? Is that them? Is them our government? The Department of Energy, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, the State of Washington Department of Energy, the State of Oregon Department of Energy.
It's called the Department of Ecology.
Yeah.
In Washington.
No, there's energy too. And ecology.
In Washington?
Yeah, there's two different ones. And in Oregon, Department of Energy and a Department of Environmental Quality. So we have different ones. The Department of Energy is doing some very good stuff in Oregon to be careful about these trucks that Lonnie was referring to. How are they going to move that? Supposedly, according to Heart of America Northwest, we might be driving down I-5 or 80, these interstates, or even any other road next to a vehicle, a truck, secretly carrying nuclear waste that will be radiating out to us. And it'd be good to travel with a Geiger counter and to go check at truck stops and see if we can figure out which one it is.
Wow, I hadn't thought of that, Louisa. That's a great idea.
I try to do that.
Wow. Okay, then. So, I want Louisa to share with us and explain some of the map, because she's a topographer, a really magnificent topographer. And so...
cartographer, but I just say I'm a map maker.
It's a cartographer, not topographer?
Topography is somebody who measures the up and downs, the hills and the valleys.
Oh,
I do watershed geography, and I base my maps on rivers.
Okay.
So I will show this.
But show this to our YouTube channel, and she's going to explain it for our kind of as an audio. We'll just lean it. Why don't we just lean it like right? I'll hold it, and maybe you can point where you're talking.
All right. And
then explain it.
Okay. So Hanford is. I'm going to look at it this way. I got to move over here. Where am I? Okay. Hanford's there. The darkish areas on this particular version of the map turn out to be the radioactive parts. Here's upriver in the Columbia River system. It begins up by Yellowstone, is right here, and it comes down to right there at Rexburg, Idaho, is the Idaho National Laboratories. Idaho Nuclear Laboratories is really what it used to be. They keep renaming it. And it is got 11 nuclear power plants going, but they're military. Then we go down.
Wow, really?
Yep. Then we go down the river down here, and they get their water from the Bitterroot Mountains, but you can't find streams around there, so it's got to be underground water, so that's interesting. Then it pukes it out into the underground, and it comes out at Idaho Falls. You wonder about them. They come out of a cliff into the town. It's gross. The Fort Hall Indian Reservation is all around there
wow.
too. And the people who I know who live there, almost everybody works up there, and they have these problems with repackaging plutonium and stuff where they get sick. They mistreat their workers all the time. Anyways, down here the river goes, and then it joins with the Columbia River from British Columbia, which comes down through some gold mines and stuff, is a bit polluted, goes around through the apple country of Wenatchee, comes down and becomes Hanford. It goes wrapping around what used to be 7 nuclear power plants that were running, just powering it up all the time just to make plutonium out of uranium. Now they can take the uranium from this one. They kept one there. They called the land around it. They said Energy Northwest is the name of the company, not the Department of Energy, but they made up a new company, not the United States government, and they said it's now run by them, which is a cooperative of cooperatives, and it's hard to tell who's responsible, and they sell all their energy to Bonneville Power Administration, which runs all the dams and the hydroelectric of here, which makes the dams and everything make 85% or 90% of the electricity for the Northwest. Then right south of Hanford here is where the coal plant is, one coal plant, nuclear or energy plant, and some tons of windmills from the wind blowing up the Columbia Gorge, which is right here. And so here's Portland, and my problem is this. If you go to windy.com, an app, and you put it on your thing, you watch when the wind comes down. Most of the time the wind comes from the west this way, from the ocean, from the west east? Towards the east is predominant 80% of the time at least. But the rest of the time various storm systems happen and they circle like that. And you get big circles. And sometimes a storm system's there and it comes like this. When it comes from here.
From where?
From the northeast. Like from Spokane into the Columbia Basin. It goes straight down the Columbia Gorge, reversing the normal direction, blowing with high winds that are accelerated by the Venturi effect of this funnel shape of the entrance in like Goldendale, where it goes on in to in Yakima there and in Goldendale, and then it hits Portland very fast.
So you're saying that Portland is
downwind of the Columbia Generating Station,
and the
which
Hanford,
is now,
like whenever Hanford has like an accident and there's release of nuclear contamination.
There is about a 8% chance, or 5 to 8% chance. I'm still checking on the details of weather systems and the history of the wind blowing.
Wow.
But if you notice, the weather is changing in the Northwest in the last 5 years. We're getting storms in the summertime and all this stuff.
We just had a big storm this last week.
We did, and that was weird.
Are you finished with the map,
I've lived here for 25 years. I just want to point out, so right now we're talking about shutting this nuclear power plant down, which is the last commercial nuke. It used to be military. Now it's commercial. And it used to make the plutonium for the nuclear bombs. And
let's explain the map.
I want to
about the fear of earthquakes. What
Thank
would
you,
happen?
because you need to read the article in. You can get it online of Earth Island Journal.
We'll have the link in the video.
Okay, and it's from about 5 years ago.
Yeah, 2013.
And it incorporates the geology reports that have been figured out in the last 10 years from the new way that they can measure the rocks of our planet, of the crust, and they, from space or from an airplane, they do magnetic resonance like for our brains and stuff, MRIs of our planet now, and they can see 10 miles down is a fault line right 4 miles from this operating nuclear power plant on one side, and another one about 2 miles, 8 miles. It's so close. It's like the Fertile Crescent. It arcs around this old faulty nuclear power plant. Now, in the book on the economics, what was the book written on the economics of the Columbia Generating Station being feasible economically as a thing? And McCullough's book on the economics of the Columbia Generating Station. But this one was a book that Physicians for Social Responsibilities got a grant to pay for this economist of the Northwest to do an analysis of whether the Columbia Generating Station is worthwhile to keep it operating on an economic point of view, and he said not at all.
Wow.
But
it's true. It's losing $500 million a year.
But what his reason was that it is shutting itself down with the scrams. More than 80% of the nukes of America, which there's 100 nukes now in America, and it's worse than 80 of them as far as turning itself off for some reason. And they call that good because it didn't blow up because its scram system turned it off. And just recently, it had that happen, right, Lonnie?
Yes.
Then
it goes into scram. Scram is like an emergency
spring.
shutdown. So those of you who don't know what a scram is like an emergency shutdown. And look, I want everyone to understand you don't have to like tune out because you don't understand it. I just watched the movie The First Secret City again for the first time after 3 years. It first came out like in 2016, and I watched it several times in 2016. It basically talks about the plight of what's going on in St. Louis, which I discuss on my show, The Age of Fission.
And
the
we
reason
need to focus on that.
Well, the reason this is pertinent is when I first saw that video, when I first saw that documentary, I thought I understood it. But now that 3 years later, I had such a deeper understanding of what they were talking about that now I really comprehend why it is so urgent that we close down the Columbia Generating Station, that I actually reached out to Jana Thrift from KEPW and said, look, can we just even have a half an hour to talk about closing down the Columbia Generating Station? Because the state of Oregon is actually in a constant state of earthquake emergency right now. Mm-hmm. Since these studies happened 3 to 4 years ago, when they discovered all these nuclear facilities were sitting on earthquake faults, and when they discovered that the licensee who built the Columbia Generating Station lied on the application, they knowingly built the Columbia Generating Station on top of an earthquake fault.
Well, they also, I want to cut them a little bit of slack. Not that I really trust the Department of Energy.
She's way nicer than me.
I am, because I hope that our government operates as we, the people, want it to operate, because we pay their salaries. We've decided we needed people to take care of our nuclear waste and stuff, so we've told us that the Environmental Protection Agency and the state of Washington are in a and who else? Somebody else, the Department of Energy, in this tri-thing agreement to clean up the waste at Hanford. But anyways, for some reason that I actually am not privy to, I'm just a grandma. I'm just an artist. I'm a resident. And the reason I am doing this show a lot is because my precious grandchildren live in Portland. Right. And I can see that if that fault line goes, I didn't finish telling you about this. Let me finish.
Go ahead.
Okay. So there is, and that article in the Earth Island Journal will show you what it is. But Seattle is right here. It's a little mushy in this version of my map, but and they're on this block.
Right there, where? Like, okay. Point to for our audio listeners, you had kind of give it some visual explanation.
All right. Thank you so much. Seattle is north of Portland by how many hours drive? 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it's on the Puget Sound. Across the Puget Sound from Bremerton Nuclear Submarine Base, but that's not what we're talking about at this talk on this radio station. But there is a fault line that is called the Seattle Fault that is starts, and it's actually a branch of the South Whidbey Island Fault. Whidbey Island's an island you take a ferry out to off of Seattle.
Is that different than the Cascadia Fault line?
It is.
Wow.
And what you were talking about is the alert that is from Arcata, California, right here, up to Bremerton, Washington.
Right. Is
the Cascadia subduction earthquake, which is right off here, 100 miles off at the most. In 15 minutes after a 9.2 earthquake that will rock the entire coast, will be coming this tsunami that will flush into here. But that's still not, it's not going to make it up to Portland. It's going to come up these various rivers and things like that. But that won't affect us. But that's what people think we're talking about. But guess what? That one will, supposedly be dampened by this rocky, the volcanic rocks of the Cascades are like a line of volcanoes. Supposedly they will muffle the shake. So that'll stop. And I've had people say, don't worry about the Columbia Generating Station. It's east of the Rockies. Well, guess what? It's not east of the Rockies. It's east of the Cascades. So here's the Columbia Generating Station operating. Guess what? Now they found out. I had this hunch that the Seattle fault comes as, it's actually the South Whidbey Island fault, comes from there, catches on to this part that's going to go straight through Seattle. Seattle will be destroyed. So it's bigger than this one. This is a 9.2. This is going to be bigger. The effect will be bigger than that one on Seattle.
So our listeners are actually wondering, why do you people live there?
Right. So that's Seattle. I don't live there because Mount Rainier is dangerously close to blowing up too, right there.
That's true.
Just down upwind of Hanford. And last time Mount St. Helens went off, there was, I think, a foot of ash ended up at Hanford.
That's right.
And clogged their ventilators and all that.
Caused big problems at Hanford.
Yeah.
And the Columbia Generating Station, which is another reason it needs to be shut.
And so here we go like this. So this fault line comes to here, and you know the blob of Oregon, which is the top of Oregon, which is right over here? You know, Oregon's like a rectangle on its side, like horizontal like this. And up here, this bulge is the Wallowa Mountains. Well, they're a bulge because they're the end of that crack that goes from Seattle to there. And look what's right in between.
It goes
just
kind of, for our audio listeners, it kind of goes kind of like at a sideways slant.
Oh, right.
From the northwest east, it goes at a sideways slant
down
inwards.
South.
Yeah, down
from
south.
From the north, from if we look at the state of Washington, where Seattle is in the north west side, the crack will go at a slant, straight, kind of at a 45 degree slant southeast, and it goes to the Wallowa Mountains.
Wow.
And right in between, if you find a map and you put it on your map, a ruler, it hits Hanford.
So that is the earthquake they're actually concerned about, Louisa?
Yes.
Not the Cascadia Fault line.
No.
That, when they know, that will just mess up
probably
the coastline.
Will muffle and everybody
but in terms
there.
of the new, and plus in Seattle,
this is much more dangerous for us.
Woo!
And then, guess what? We break up this faulty build thing. So in that article, it says that they interviewed the engineer of the Columbia Generating Station, and those people admitted that it was not engineered for that size of a fault that would rock them. It's engineered for smaller than that by 2 or 3 degrees. That's a lot. That will break it. If it happens, it will break it, and there's a chance of it happening.
Wow.
And it will break, and it will have a meltdown, and it will then go clunk, and the radioactive fallout is going to go up into the sky. And if it's one of those days of 8% of the chance that the winds are hitting the mouth of the Columbia Gorge from the northeast, then it will shoot it very fast, this radioactive fallout, right into 250,000 people, 500,000 people that are the Portland area, and Portland, millions. Anyways,
I have no idea.
A couple million people. I don't know how many. I can't remember that.
A couple 100,000, I thought.
I think it's 250,000 in the core of Portland, and the round there makes it 500,000. I think is what Portland is. At any rate, it'll get there within hours.
It'll be catastrophic.
And it could be within hours that this fallout will land in Portland. And the Chernobyl story is, I'm making a map that you can overlay them, and you see how it drifted in an anomaly. The day that Chernobyl happened, did you notice that it blew towards Sweden, from the Ukraine?
Yeah.
That was one of those days when the winds blew backwards.
The minor,
like usually
the 8% chance of having it blow up everywhere.
Go backwards, go towards the west. It usually goes the other way, but depending on the storms, these swirls
Well, my
happen.
thing about it is, if there is an earthquake underneath the Columbia Generating Station, Tom Carpenter from the Hanford Challenge, who really works to defend the workers' rights that have working at Hanford, he has agreed with me, because I had this idea, like, if there's an earthquake, it's only 11 miles or almost 12 miles away from the Hanford site.
No, it is in the middle of Hanford.
It is in the middle of Hanford, but it's very close to the tanks. That's the key. It's very close to some of those tanks that need to be churned 24 hours a day, which I learned from Heidi Lambert, who worked at the Hanford Station. Her father worked there, so she knew what was going on, and she mentioned that there's tanks that have to be churned 24 hours a day.
I was not aware of that yet, but
it is something that really they don't talk about, because it will cause a fire if they can't get into the nuclear generating station.
Plus,
for
does
2
everybody
weeks.
know that nuclear waste is hot?
No.
And so it has to be cooled as well.
Exactly.
And this earthquake will break all kinds of stuff.
Right.
It's going to break pipes all over. And do people know that radioactive zappings of steel pipes gives pipe embrittlement, so that they're more brittle. So when they're shaken by an earthquake, there's more likely to break.
Well, that's called the Wigner effect.
I don't know.
Yes, it is.
I've heard it.
I know
embrittlement.
It's called. I mean, the Wigner effect means that it affects the metal. This is why the airplanes now
are breaking.
Their windows are falling out of the windows like they have no idea. It's because the radiation circles the earth.
Yeah, I have a friend who crashed his airplane, and he's researching all that because he thinks it broke for no good reason.
It does. It's the Wigner effect. There's a whole sign. It's Wigner, and they pronounce it Wigner.
So radiation affects metals, and most of these apparatuses that are too big for humans to play with at Hanford and Columbia, the Savannah River in Tennessee, Valley Authority, and all that stuff. There's a number of these sites around. Anyways, the radiation is working on their metals that they're holding this stuff in as the years go by. And at every nuclear power plant, they have to right now keep all their nuclear waste at the nuclear power plant, because we don't know what to do with it. And so these are in tanks by everything. So all across America, there's 100 nukes going on. Next to each one of them is stored waste that is hot for quite a long time. Well, back when I was working in Chicago in the 80s...
wait. We have just a few minutes.
Okay. Thanks.
We can talk about this on my radio show.
Okay, and what we're going to do in our format is have the first half be an article that we want you to know about, anything general that we want you to know how to use the government system.
And we'll give you phone numbers.
And we want to hear how it goes.
That's right. And we'll report on our actions. Like July 8th, I believe, I have an appointment with Ron Wyden's office. And so that next week, I'll report on here.
And we're hoping we can record it. We're going to see how far we can record it and bring it onto the radio.
Well, she thinks we can record it. See, she has much greater faith in Ron Wyden and our elected officials than I do. I'm jaded. She's still optimistic and sweet about these people.
And I will
she thinks we have a democracy still.
I am going to defend our democracy against creeps.
Anyways, so this is our intro show, and we want to thank everybody. Please join our show on KEPW. You can listen to us online. I'm going to post these up here, and I'm hoping we can do these YouTube videos so that my YouTube channel will actually see the two of us instead of just listening to our show. But you can listen to the podcast at www.kepw.org. But it will be posted up on my Spreaker channel, Lonnie Clark. I think I'm going to make its own show. It's going to be called The Last Nuke, and it'll be its own show title, so you'll be able to find it very easily. You just go to Spreaker.com. It'll post up again on YouTube, but only as an audio. It'll post up on Facebook. It'll post up on Twitter. It goes up to iHeart Radio and iTunes Radio. So those are podcasts that you can find us there once the show airs.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I am also publishing the Nip the Nukes newsletter. It's my written journalism, and I'm doing photography and other things. So articles are going into that, and that's going to become a email newsletter.
Well, we can post the link on every single show. We'll just post up the link so people can subscribe.
Yeah, so we got Nip the Nukes Northwest is a newsletter with writing and articles and stuff, and then a blog for the Nuke Info Project Northwest, and that's going to be different.
Great.
One is going to be just printed out newsletter.
Okay, well, look, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We are not sure when this will actually start posting up on KEPW, but I'm definitely putting it up on Spreaker right away, because KEPW, it's based on the Occupy role model of consensus, so things take longer to get on the air there. But that doesn't mean we can't put it up on my own Spreaker channel and up on my YouTube channel, because this is urgent. We feel both very strongly.
We want you to know that we're both like human beings, and we are doing this in a personal way. So we want to be friends with more and more people.
See, told you, she's way nicer than me.
Yeah, we want to be friends with everyone. Peace.
Bye, you guys. Thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you guys next week, because because we're going to do another video, and I think that this is a great format.
We're going to bring you a lot of cool stuff.
And we really hope you keep subscribing, share our videos, like and subscribe.
And work hard and help us.
Welcome
shut
to
the
our
nuke.
channel, and welcome to our new show called The Last Nuke.